Hello, and a huge warm welcome to my guest today, Andrew Symeou, who I'm very excited to chat to about Quizcards, which is a voice operated quiz app for learning. But before we get into that, I just want to tell you a little more about our guest. Andrew is a dedicated and accomplished educator with a proven track record in teaching physical education and science, complemented by leadership roles such as head of house and advanced lead teacher. Andrew is currently working for a well known charity called Teach First as a development lead. Andrew oversees the training and progress of trainee teachers on the secondary course. And at Quizcards, their goal is to reshape the educational landscape with cutting edge voice technology. Their flagship product the Quizcards app, not only offers effective learning methods like spaced repetition and customizable quizzes, but also introduces voice operated quizzes with a focus on speech and language, with the aim of making learning more accessible, engaging, and effective. I'm really excited to learn more about this. So let's just jump straight into it. I'd love to welcome Andrew to the podcast today. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good. Thank you. How are you?
Yes, good, thank you. I'm really excited to learn a bit more about quiz cards. But first, shall we start with a little background to you and how you came to working in education? Is it something that you've always wanted to do?
No, not at all, really. I didn't actually have any plans to go into education, so I did my degree in sport and exercise science, just something that I was passionate about. I didn't really have a clear career path in mind. I did have somewhere in the back of my mind that I wanted to work in the public sector because I felt
Okay.
like those kind of roles had some kind of deeper meaning to it. And I guess when I was younger as well, you're not always thinking about salary, and you might be thinking about, those kind of bigger goals. Where can I make an impact in society and stuff like that? So
Yeah.
those were the kind of things that excited me. Um, so yeah, I think I was just drawn to doing something kind of meaningful, and teaching ticked that box. But it was just actually one thing that I tried that I didn't know if I was going to stick with. But after my first year, yeah, it just started to come naturally to me, and it just became something that I got really really passionate about in the years following my training.
Okay. And so just thinking about kind of growing up, what was your experience like in education? Did you enjoy school? Was it something that you had fun?
I had a really varied experience depending on what subject I was in, and
Oh, okay.
so I did relatively well at school, and I enjoyed certain subjects. There were some subjects and some teachers that I didn't respond well to, and that I just couldn't get myself motivated for. So I think it was really mixed. It wasn't so much that I was so passionate about um, a particular subject, or that I really enjoyed school in a sense, but I had some really good experiences, and it made me think. When I came to consider becoming a teacher, I was like, I want to be like this kind of teacher, not like
Yeah.
that kind of teacher, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Isn't it funny how they always stick in your mind? The teachers that you really kind of gel with throughout your education, they always stick in mind. I always remember in primary school, there was a teacher called Mrs. Johnson, and she was my year four, year five teacher. And it wasn't my memory of kind of the content or the learning, it was our kind of relationship as student teacher. She was really compassionate, she was really understanding. I suffered terribly with anxiety in primary school, and she was so lovely that all the time when I was thinking about going into education, I was like, I want to be that sort of teacher. I want them to feel comfortable around me, and that really sticks, doesn't it, from your own experience when you go into it. It's lovely to hear that. So, some of your work involves being a mentor to trainee teachers and early career teachers. What does that role kind of entail, and why did you want to do that particular role?
Okay, so the reason I wanted to do that role is because I've seen the challenges that early career teachers face when they start, and this actually comes back to my experience of when I tried teaching for the first time when I went and started the course. I started a PGCE course, and I really didn't have a great time. I found it really really difficult. There was obviously a really huge workload. It was very difficult to manage behavior and to get things going the way I wanted it to go. So I've seen how it can start really difficult, and how with experience and with certain tips and strategies added, that things can get a lot easier, and that it can become a lot more natural and a lot easier. So for me, I can see teachers around me coming in and experiencing the same thing at PGCE
Yeah.
level, or in their first 2 years of teaching. So people in that ECT, early career teacher framework period. So while they're doing that, I can see people struggling, see how they're having the same difficulties that I had. And I started to think I've got some of the skills now that I could give them to kind of solve that issue. So the role itself entails like observing lessons. So I go in, I check on their lessons, how they're getting on. I'm providing them detailed feedback, discussing strategies on how to improve the quality of teaching and the delivery week on week. But I think the key elements of the role is about being able to solve problems. So if there's a kid misbehaving in the class, like instead of going in and being like, why is this happening? I can go in and actually suggest some solutions to the problem. And I think the problem solving is a really, really key part. And the other thing for me, I think the role really entails presenting feedback in a way that's motivational and not demoralizing, because ultimately they do want to become great teachers. They need time to become great teachers, but they can feel really demoralized when they're finding it difficult. So it's about balancing when to give like that kind of feedback that's constructive, but giving it in the right way that doesn't demoralize and doesn't demotivate and put people off the profession, really, because I noticed that people don't last long in teaching. And it is a real problem.
Yeah.
So I've kind of hoped that I could make a difference in that way.
I think that's really important, isn't it? It's not just about what you're saying, but the context in which you're delivering it as well. And we say all the time, don't we, about like children when they're learning, and you have to deliver it in a way that is really engaging and really empowering and giving them the tools to kind of thrive themselves. So I guess that just translates across when you're dealing with students who are adults and like say with teachers. It's really important the kind of the words you use and the tone that you take. I guess that's really important as well for you.
Yeah, definitely. And it goes back to what you were saying about experience in school as well, because as a student, when it's those teachers that kind of make you feel a bit demoralized, demotivated, and they knock your confidence in a way that you can't really engage with those subjects. Like for me, when I was younger, there were subjects like maths that I never felt confident in. So we've been on that end. All of us have kind of been on that end, probably in some kind of subject or some kind of setting. But then I think sometimes people can forget that in the school setting when they're at their professional level and they've got to give feedback. So yeah, it's about having high standards still and being really constructive and coming up with solutions to problems, but doing it in a way that can kind of inspire rather than make people feel deflated.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think doing that role has there been any kind of almost self-development for you within that role and learning kind of new skills and new ways of doing things as you've gone along as well?
Yeah, for sure, because you have to approach each person differently. Like each person's an individual, and you have to get to know the people really well. So I think that may be a challenge that some leaders in other positions that are not doing a mentoring role, they might find that a bit difficult because they don't have that personal interaction with the people that they're working with. So, for example, if you were a assistant or a head teacher or at that kind of higher level, you probably know your staff, but maybe not as well as somebody who's doing a mentor role, which I think is slightly different to having that kind of like line management role. So I think how you approach different people is one for sure. But I think the other thing is sometimes you come across a problem and it's a challenge for both of us to solve. So I don't always have the answers like, oh, why don't you do this? Sometimes we try something that doesn't work and it's trial and error and we've got to figure it out together. And
Absolutely.
yeah, that's the thing that I've developed along the way, because after a while you realize, oh, I had that problem with this trainee last year. Let me try the same solution I tried with them. And sometimes it comes off that way.
I think in roles like that, it's easy to kind of look at the effects that you are having on the mentee, but actually there's a lot of kind of co-development happening in things like that, isn't it? And it's really important when you acknowledge that to be able to move forward. I think that's a great thing about doing stuff like mentorship. So that's a really important part of what you do. But you started Quizcards. You co-founded Quizcards as a new company. I think was it last year that you started? Yeah. So tell us a bit about what Quizcards is and who can benefit from it.
Okay, so Quizcards is a newly founded company that has developed a voice-operated quiz application, and it allows students to listen to questions and answer those questions verbally. They get instant feedback, and the idea came around the point of trying to recreate study flashcards, which people use all the time. but to add the audio verbal aspect to it that children might miss out on when they're studying alone. So when I was a student, I used to write a load of flashcards, give them to friends or family at home and say, can you test me on this? Because I've got a test tomorrow and I need to know if I understand it. Now, the problem with that is that relies on there being friends and family around for me to give that to. And unfortunately, that's not something that every child has access to every evening when they get home from school or on the weekends. It might be that their parents work or they don't have somebody around that can help them. So what we wanted to do was provide something that can kind of replace that verbal Q&A kind of thing and the powers of that, but to bring that into children's homes so that they can easily access that on a device, laptop or a mobile phone. So essentially, we're trying to provide an alternative learning method for students that might struggle with the traditional types of sitting there writing up notes and reading textbooks. I think the other element to it is that by making it really speech and language focused, we remove some of the barriers associated with difficulties with reading, students that might struggle with writing, and they may be completely blocked from like recalling that content because they're just overwhelmed by how much they have to read or how much they have to write without any kind of support or that voice kind of, confirming it with them. So, even those students that might receive help with those things, so students that receive help for writing, where they might get a scribe, or students that get a reader in exams, they don't actually have that when they're studying at home. So again, it's about kind of to try and open up that accessibility. I think things like that are being done for exams and actual formal assessments, but they're not really being done for that kind of that kind of informal assessment where the students can just kind of check their knowledge. So just to summarize, really, Quizcards is just a verbal flashcards quiz app for students that might struggle with traditional methods of learning.
Okay, that's brilliant, because as you say, not everybody accesses learning and information or processes it in the same way either. You get some students that are very kind of audible in terms of needing to receive information in that way. Where did the idea come from? Was it something that you kind of you personally struggle with and you're meeting that need and then subsequently the needs of lots of other people, or did you experience it with someone close to you? Like, where does an idea like this spring from?
Yeah, so the idea actually came from my co-founder, who was using it in a very different. He had the idea from a very different perspective, because
Interesting.
he's not in education, but what he does is he learns how to do things through podcasts. So he was learning how to do things like coding and learning some other new skills as an adult, just for to develop his own skills. And while he was listening to these podcasts, watching videos, he was telling me that he was having the problem of he's not actually being able to check if he's understood what he's just listened to. And he wanted something that was kind of easy and on the go. He doesn't like to sit there and write up loads of notes on these podcasts. He really likes listening to it. He likes the audio aspect of it.
Yeah.
When he told me about, is there like a way that we could have like a verbal quiz? Can we try and develop something along those lines? He came to me because I'm in education. And even though he wasn't thinking about children's education at the time, he was thinking about adult education. I said to him, as a secondary school teacher, I can tell you that this would solve a lot of problems in a secondary school setting. And then having spoke to other people, primary school teachers have told me it would really benefit them as well. So it's kind of opened up the idea a bit more. And then from that point, we said, okay, we're going to develop this for children's learning initially. And we're also going to consider branching out into other areas of learning in general, because those accessibility things that we spoke about, they don't just apply to children, and they can apply to everybody.
Yeah, that's so true. That's really, really true. And I think you find some of the most magical things and magical ideas come from that lived experience of, I need to solve this problem for me. So how can I address this? And that's great that you're coming from like different subject fields essentially, and you've managed to bring that educational element in. And you're right, it could span across all different age groups. It's not something that's just specific. I think you would automatically think, oh, this would be great for secondary school because GCSEs, and that's
Yeah.
when they're going to be revising. And I just kind of, I'm having flashbacks of the flashcards that I used to do when I did my GCSE practice. And I was like color coded flashcards all stuck up on my wall. Like it took hours to read the content, write the content, put it up on the wall, revisit it. But then again, unless someone is physically testing me on it and checking the answers, that kind of understanding of that recall, it wasn't there. So it sounds like a great thing for people to be using. So is it something that you are designing or have designed, sorry, to be used in the home? Is it something to be used within an educational setting? Can it cross both barriers? Where's it best placed?
Yeah, I think it was initially the thought was about home learning, but I think it crosses both barriers really. It When using it with headphones and you're kind of locked in listening to the questions answering, it can be done in a loud environment as well as in a quiet environment because the microphone is only picking up what you're saying. So it can be used in both settings, but the most benefit I think will be when students are trying to study on their own independently, preparing for a test, and they want to check that knowledge that they've got. The other thing, like you said, you referred to like spending a lot of time writing out the flashcards, but then I think the actual beneficial part is actually being tested on them at the end. So then it's all that time being spent writing them, which this could save. Obviously, there's a lot quicker ways to do it on a computer. You could type up your questions, or you could use the questions that we already have as presets, because I've designed loads for different subjects to this day. So yeah, I think it can cross both barriers really. I also think it would be really, really well used in like school libraries where students might come out of lesson to do a bit of studying. So yeah, just loads of applications for it really.
And you just touched upon something that was going to be my next question, and that's in terms of like the content. So where does the content of the quizzes come from? Is it something that you were designing? Does it access AI at all for this kind of content?
Okay, so the content that we've created for our demo version, the way we've done it is I've specialized and I've created content for biology, chemistry, and physics, which are subjects I have taught up to GCSE level, and PE, which is my other subject. So those are all subjects I've taught to GCSE level. So I've written the content for that myself. For other subjects, for the sake of the demo, we've used AI and tapped into AI to get some of that content generated. So yeah, the content comes from like a mix of places at the moment. But as it stands, the current product is is like a tester, it's like a demo. It is functional and you could study from it. But there's just a lot more to come. So I don't want to say this is the product. We are still in development. We're still raising funding, and we're really pushing for a new advanced product to come out.
Okay, so with that in mind, then are you looking for individuals, settings, and places like that to test the demo? How is it going in terms of production on that front?
Yeah, exactly. So we're at a point now where we are calling for teachers, teaching assistants, school leaders, anybody that might want to try this out to get in touch with us, either via LinkedIn, Quizcards Limited on LinkedIn, TikTok. We're also on our website. You can go on quizcards.co.uk, and our email address info@quizcards.co.uk. But that information will be found on the website and LinkedIn. If anybody is interested in trialing it out with a group of students, what you can do is get in contact with us. We'll specifically get some tailored quizzes for your students.
Okay.
So we'd provide them with the quiz content that they need and give them a chance to just use all the features and feedback to us and let us know how it's going and how we can develop it further. So yeah, we're at that stage of testing at the moment.
Amazing. Okay, what I'll do is I'll pop some links and the information in the episode below as well, so that people have got those informations and they can reach out to you. So that's great. So there's a term, oracy, that's going around and is being used more and more frequently. For anyone who hasn't heard this term before, what does that mean, and does that have any link with what you're doing?
Yeah, for sure. So oracy is something, actually, it's interested me a lot in education since I've been teaching, because it's something that I think we don't use enough. But oracy really is a student's ability to articulate ideas. So it's how they develop their understanding and engage with the learning through spoken language. And that's the difference, oracy compared to just a typical lesson. So a lesson that taps into oracy really gets students to articulate verbally and to speak. So a lot of the school system is obviously based around written communication, and I think that that's an area where improvement could come in the future. So in my opinion, speaking and listening are really important in child development and learning. And once students do enter the world of work and come out of school, they will be assessed more often on their ability to articulate their ideas. They'd be asked to do presentations at work. They might have to do an interview. All these kinds of things are something that we should be preparing our students for. And by including oracy opportunities in lessons, so opportunities for them to articulate their answers verbally, we are not only helping them engage with the content, but we're helping them develop those speech and communication skills, which would help them in life as well. And just an example of that, a student can really understand content and do really well in an exam. If they then go to explain the concept to somebody in an interview and they mispronounce the words, or they're getting confused about how to explain it, it doesn't always come off. The knowledge that they have isn't always shown. So that's just an example of like what oracy is, and something that we're trying to tackle in schools as well.
It's really hard, isn't it? Having that, they're two completely different things, understanding and processing something, and then having that skill to be able to articulate it back to somebody in that same way. And I think that's something we see quite frequently in our young people, is that barrier between the two. So I agree. I think there's a real need to support that kind of speech and language. And you've kind of answered my next question, which was, why is it so important to have that kind of speech and language? And I think from someone who spent many years working in early years and seeing so many young children needing extra additional support with speech and language and things like that, even at that young age, but you don't kind of see it as frequently as the children get older. And I imagine going into secondary school, you know, that there isn't such an intense focus on it unless there is a real need, and a real kind of challenge with it. But I guess something like this is giving lots of chances to develop that skill within that context, I guess.
Yeah, exactly, because students are really challenged to then have to speak their answers, explain it, and at the moment it is multiple choice questions, but the vision and the plan for the main product would have longer answer questions where students can actually explain the concept, and our app will be able to assess whether they've got the answer right or wrong, and provide some feedback. The other thing I just wanted to add is that there are studies out there that connect actively saying things out loud and actually remembering and being able to recall. And like I said before, the reason I used to get people to ask me questions is because when I used to hear myself saying the answer, I used to be able to remember those conversations when I'm in the exam hall afterwards. Because when somebody says something to me, or when I say something to somebody, I remember it.
Yeah.
Sometimes I can write things down, and I can write something down while I'm half paying attention, and I don't actually, I can't recall that. And that was something that we're really trying to tackle. And that's where the importance of it is kind of twofold, because we're looking at making learning more effective and efficient. And then we're also looking at the whole oracy thing and trying to get people to be able to speak better, more clearly, and be confident in their communication. I think one of the other things is that if somebody is using the product as it is at the moment and they speak an answer, but they don't speak it so clearly, or they might mumble it or something, it might not pick up the right answer. And the good thing about that is it will encourage you to really pronounce your words and to say it nice and clearly. And yeah, that's just something that we think is really important.
No, I agree. And I was smiling as you said that, because I always say how sometimes it just takes, you just need someone to bounce ideas off of. They don't necessarily have to even respond to you, but the fact that I'm verbally saying out loud as I'm thinking, especially like with my own studies, if I'm just talking something through and then I'm like, oh, brilliant, thanks for your time. And they've not said a word back to me, but the fact that I've been able to just talk something out loud rather than it just being inside my own head means that I've been able to process, understand more what I'm talking about, and then, as you say, recall it at a later date because I remember the conversation. So I completely agree. I think talking verbally is a really great way to help that recall. And actually, something that I'm looking into at the moment, which I'm finding interesting, and I'm new to it because I don't kind of work in the classroom anymore. I'm new to it, but it's the whole idea of retrieval practice, which sounds very similar to like what you're saying in terms of different ways that teachers get students to retrieve information and recall it. And so this kind of sounds a bit like an element of that where you're using something to retrieve already processed and known information to bring it to the forefront to have that recall. And I guess that's a similar thing. And I know I think there's a big kind of encouragement from Ofsted around retrieval practice as well, isn't there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's something that has become part of every lesson I teach, and that's not just me. That was the schools that I was in as well. We're doing the same thing. We start every lesson with 5 or 10 questions that students have to recall from a previous topic. So just getting students to engage with prior learning and remember, that is effective in itself. And just adding the verbal element to that, we just think gives it that extra little bit of power.
No, I love it. Excellent. Okay, so what are the long-term goals then for Quizcards? Where do you see it going? Obviously, you've spoken about the fact that it's in development and you're at the point in production where you're wanting to pilot it and get some feedback. But what are your long-term goals for Quizcards?
So the long-term goals, what we really want to do is we want to remove those barriers from traditional learning methods, and we want to put something on the table that is accessible to all students, where they can just go onto it and they can access a different way of learning, this verbal kind of focused way of learning. And yeah, we just want to really expand and get into schools, become a regular part of teachers' practice, become a regular an option for a student that might not know how to prepare for a test. So yeah, we just want to provide another option, and we can see that there are so many like EdTech type websites where you can do quizzes, and there's so many great platforms out there. But I don't think there's anybody focusing on speech and listening as much as we are, and we want to kind of be the leaders in that side of things.
Brilliant. That sounds great. And I'm just thinking, as you were talking as well, obviously we've spoken about kind of students revising at home and using it in settings. And I guess from my own kind of personal research interest as well, those students who are home educators or home learning or learning in different types of provisions, they can all access that as well. So I guess there's no kind of discrimination in terms of what type of student you are. It's there out there for all learners.
Yeah, exactly. And that's why we're trying to get feedback from different types of learners as well. We want to hear how students with particular needs might be struggling with it, with their learning, and we want to hear from them about how this works for them or if this works for them. So we're just trying to collect all that information from the testing and try to make it as inclusive and accessible as we can, so that everybody can benefit from it. And we have a commitment. I have a commitment with my co-founder that we will keep, on the student level at least, we will always keep a free option for students to be able to access this and not have that funding kind of barrier. So as we do develop our business and grow and expand, there will always be a version of this that students can just go onto the website and just use. And that's something that we're really committed to.
Amazing, brilliant. Well, I'm really excited to follow where this goes and anything that I can do to help. I'm fully on board. We've already touched upon how people can get involved and get to know more. You said about the website that they can access and the social medias, and I'll put links underneath for you so that people can reach out to you. Just to close out, kind of, because Recap is all about embracing everyone and making everyone feel at home and part of that supportive community, I do ask all guests to think of one piece of advice or an empowering message to give our listeners to help share that love and support. So if you could say just one thing that could help even just one person, what would you like to say?
Okay, so I mean, I've spent a lot of time talking about schools and teachers and education, so I want to address parents really, because this is something that, I probably should have mentioned a bit more before, but just want to say, like, your children, they don't have to learn the same way everybody else does. So children's educational needs, they vary so much. Don't be disheartened if your child struggles to recall information or struggles with the methods that are out there in the typical kind of way, and keep looking for what works for your children and the students, and we'll find a way that works for them.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time today, Andrew. Really appreciate you coming on and sharing this exciting project with us, and look forward to following it as you go on and develop it further.
Okay, thank you for having me.
Thank you.